welcome to Talking TSM, the Game House's talk show about TSM's LCS team. I'm Robert Haynes, your host and your guide, and I've gotten so used to this that I am not using my Google Doc for the first time ever. Kind of excited, to be honest with you. But also, probably more exciting, we have a guest on the show today. We have Meleri. If those of you may remember him, he came on and talked about his algorithm for TSM, and he was also the one that let us know that Lost was going to be as good as Lost was. So, Meleri, I'm so excited to have you back on. For those who may not have listened to that first episode, can you give us a quick preview about yourself?
Yeah, my name's Mallory. I am a data scientist by trade, and on my off time, I have built a prediction model that I've been using to predict matches for the LCS and the LEC, a few Worlds or MSI events, proving grounds, and I have been sporting an upward trend of 60 to 80% accuracy, depending on the event, in the past few years.
Which has been pretty awesome. I know this season was a little different than what I think you were hoping for in some regards. I know you still did pretty well, if I remember correctly. What was your percentage this split?
Yeah, I ended at 65%, but I'm still holding on to this set until the entire season is over because it's all going to be combined in the end anyway.
Yeah, I mean, with the for those of you who may not know, the records carry over from the spring season, which is pretty cool too. So I am, yeah, I mean, I'm pretty excited to talk a little bit about this. Let's start with just the TSM players. I know you've been tracking them. How did they do in terms of how you were predicting, and just where did they end up according to your model at their positions?
Yeah, so the crazy thing about TSM and what really gave me a huge headache this whole past split was that TSM performed well despite despite their metrics. They performed well as teams and they performed well in unquantifiable ways. They communicated better, they team fought better despite losing in lane, which is great. And I love to see teams do that because it shows mental fortitude, it shows that they have coordination and planning that goes beyond what just the skills of the players and the sum of their parts, so to speak. So, that being said, Huni himself, I would put it in the realm of top laners pretty well among top laners, and I think he did do very well, especially in playoffs. But top laners in general don't rank super well just because of the stats they produce. Kill participation, he was 43rd, including playoffs, and wards cleared, 47th. Sitting about 30, 37, 38 for a lot of the other metrics. But for the role he was playing, that's okay. That's not that bad. I think he actually performed pretty well, all things considered.
Absolutely.
And Spiga, I think, actually did much better in playoffs and really impressed, especially when it comes to if you check first blood percentage in playoffs and in the regular season, he ended up being first. So with 74.1. Oh, no, that's kill participation. Uh 56% first blood rate, which is the highest in playoffs and in the regular season. Y'all also had a high kill participation, XBD 10, and the highest wards cleared per minute, which sure there could be better things you could be doing with your time, but it's good to know that they did have this game plan and they were going towards it. And he really turned it on towards the end. He was putting up some pretty poor jungle stats during the regular season, but it seems obvious to me that they worked on that. Power of Evil was one I think that really personified my thoughts earlier of don't do anything impressive in the lane, but be a real team fight force towards the end. when it comes to KDA and kill participation, he was eighth in the entire league and sixth in damage per minute. However, he was 45th at gold difference at 10 and 41st at CS difference at 10. So that puts him very, very far at the bottom as far as my model is concerned. But obviously, we know that's just not the case. He's not the worst mid laner in the league,
No.
but the computer doesn't know that, like I said before. And Lost, I think, really, really did well. I said last time I was on that Lost real strengths were in team fighting, damage per minute, and in lane, you could probably expect him to lose out. And while that did happen at first, during playoffs, he was seventh in CSD at 10 and fourth at CS per minute. He still ended up pulling very good numbers for damage per minute, and that boosted him up a lot to be the best performing player on TSM as far as the model's concerned. But his kill participation was 43rd in the league, and I think that may have some acknowledgement to how we fell out of playoffs was the separation, and we weren't didn't really seem coordinated and all in one piece.
Yeah.
Sword Art, on the other hand, supports are a little weird because they're going to be bottom in CS per minute, they're going to be bottom in damage per minute. But as far as just supports are concerned, I put Sword Art pretty high up there because the entire season has had great warding stats, cleared and placed wards, and has a great kill participation despite everything. Now that all being said, I actually audited myself because I realized my model is really, really bad at predicting TSM games. I had a I had a 30% prediction rate for just TSM.
Well,
And
that's
if I
understandable too, considering how they
yeah,
play.
and considering how they play, and despite their stats, they're still winning. It's awful. It's awful for me to say, oh, well, they're not doing well, and they're consistently ranked on my file. They're consistently ranked seventh, eighth, but they got second place in the regular season. They almost got to they got third in playoffs.
Hmm.
Um, despite that, and my 30% prediction rate, if they just hit the average of every other team, which I got about uh, 67 to 72% for every other team, maybe 60% for Immortals and Fly, which is the second lowest. If they just hit that average, my prediction rate in general would have gone up about 5%, which in terms of an 18 game season is a lot.
Yeah.
So hopefully for the next split they start to do a little bit more, but I will be looking into some way to maybe flip whatever I think TSM's actually gonna do if that doesn't happen.
Well, and I think it's interesting because I know a lot of the stats that you talk about are ones that I try to mention on the show. As much as possible. Like the warding stats, I felt like for Sword Art were extremely important, and we saw during playoffs that they fell off, right? And it's part of the reason I
Yeah.
think that they started losing the games is they it felt like they were playing a very different style than what they had gotten used to. And
Hmm.
something that I'm interested to see is how is this 27 game split going to affect your model, right? Because I think that more data and more chances against certain teams and whatnot will probably be pretty interesting. When it comes to how how the team might fare in your system, because I think you're right, right? Like we saw Power of Evil. I kept saying I was like, listen, I'm watching the games. I know he's making plays, but like statistically, Power of Evil was like near the bottom in a lot of statistics, and like one of the biggest ones for me is team fighting, right? Like if he's supposed to be going around and roaming, his team fighting should be up. It wasn't. Then we're talking about things like his laning stats, also not super high. So it was really just
Yep.
his ability to make plays, which is sure something that's pretty hard to put into an algorithm because the man like literally honestly he would lose lanes sometimes to some pretty low tier people, but would make the plays necessary to get himself caught up at different times. So
Yeah.
I think it's very interesting to see that your model kind of like fluctuated with a team like TSM because I think I'd like to ask you this: do you feel similarly that this, in my opinion, means they're going to improve? They are going to have a much better split because of the fact that they have they really didn't play up to their standard during the spring.
No, I totally agree with that. I think that hopefully, and with Erickson as a new coach, there are a lot of things that maybe they're focusing too much on their macro decisions, their team fighting. Early on in the split, when they're really starting to pick up, it was always okay. They have a deficit at 15, but
Mm-hmm.
they just win anyway, and that's good. And we want to see things like that. But with the players that we have, we should expect something a little more. And we've seen a few of those glimmers. But I think really what they need to focus on is regaining their individual playmaking. I think the meta will shift back into something that is much more appropriate to that. It is an MSI right now.
Yes.
And they already have the foundation there to win despite their laning disadvantages, which I think is the hardest thing to teach is the team macro and the coordination. So if they already have that down, I have no doubt at all that they will be able to pick it up to just polish individual play.
Yeah, and I think that that's where we're going to see them being together longer. Um, coming into play. I don't think that a lot of fans really understand how important it is for these players to stick together. There's just so much movement in the LCS. We're seeing the LEC. So many pieces are moving in the LEC right now, and we see teams like 100 Thieves, right, who on paper are very talented, but they make certain moves and they fall off every single time. Like they'll make a move, it'll look good for maybe a week or two, and then they're bad. They're back to where they were before. So
Hmm.
I feel like with this summer coming up, and I don't know if you've had time to run your algorithm for the summer yet. I know you said you're making some changes. Um, but I mean, just based off of what you've seen, where are you kind of thinking that they can end up? Like, what's your range for them? In terms of record for this split.
Yeah, there are a few things I need to add. There could still be some roster changes that go in, so everything's
Mm-hmm.
subject to change. I haven't added Abadage yet to this model because I wanted to look at it as a retrospective for this episode specifically
Yeah.
with Ryoma and Damonte. So Abadage being put in is huge. Well, maybe not huge for us. We would hate to see that, but it's great, and more competition is good in certain situations. So at the moment, now, remember that my model really, really has a hard time predicting TSM, has a 30% prediction rate. They have them finishing at sixth. So if you just flip that, that would put us at around third or fourth, which is understandable. And I think if TL is the same, which it probably will be,
Yeah.
I don't doubt that TL will still be as good. C9, fresh off of MSI,
They're going to struggle at the
I
beginning
think
for sure.
I think they will show up in the beginning, unless they really, really bomb out and have a terrible mental and that happens sometimes. If they don't have a break and they burn out or they just did really poorly, they can get worse. Considering the finishing score lines, 12-6, tied for second tiebreaker, C9's only one game up. Any fluctuation in C9 could really be a big benefit for us,
Mm-hmm.
but I do worry about 100 Thieves being right on our tail. I think Dig, honestly and unfortunately, has a downward trend,
Yeah.
especially if they keep Dardoch. Wasn't super impressed with that. I think CLG will end up taking their place. Maybe Evil Geniuses.
Yeah. That's
So I
exactly
would
what
put
I
us
was
right
thinking
now
too.
comfortably at third or fourth, depending on C9 and 100 Thieves mostly. As far as ending scoreline, so there's 27 more games. I'll I'd say they'll probably end up somewhere around. I don't have all the players in yet. I have to run it. So this will just be off the top of my head. I bet that they will end up with about, I'd say 32-13.
Okay. Okay, so that would be
Uh,
what? That'd be 22-7, right?
that'd be 20-7.
20-7. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
That makes sense to me. I would have to actually run it and go forward and see what it thinks would happen, but I honestly can't trust it right now. At least not for TSM. I could probably do it for all the other teams and just see what happens.
Yeah. No, I think TSM's a little bit harder to predict right now. I do. I mean, I guess I want to go into this. Do you think that they move anybody? I mean, I talked about it on the previous podcast about, or I think it was 2 podcasts ago now, where it was like, hey, let's keep the band together. Let's keep moving forward. I don't personally think that adding Cody's son or, I guess maybe there's been an argument for Broken Blade. If they were to add him, I don't really know. I guess if they get the green card from or for Power of Evil, that could be maybe the only move I would personally consider.
Hmm.
But I don't know. I mean, I'd be curious to see your thoughts. Like, do you think they keep the band together or not?
I would hope so. I think that there is a lot to be gained from just keeping the players together and not having to relearn certain calls, certain synergies, certain
Mm-hmm.
timers and roles that they have within each other. As far as Academy goes, if we're just looking at our own Academy team, I think Hauntzer, Cody-san, and Year-san all really showed up in the Proving Grounds.
Mm-hmm.
Hauntzer over Huni, I'm not entirely sure about. I would feel okay about it. I would have felt okay with it in the last off season instead of getting Hooney. We just got Hanser. I'd feel okay about that. Cody's son is someone that I'm not exceptionally confident about. He performs well sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
especially in academy. He really proved he should not be in academy.
No.
But I don't know. I feel like he is a little bit more of a known quantity and just does not perform in the end of it.
Yeah.
Yurson, however, I know we have Sword Art, and I'm not going to complain about Sword Art, but we will lose Yurson to someone, and we will feel very bad about it. Similar to Treats and Tactical, Yurson is the next one of those, and I know
Interesting.
that.
Yeah. I mean, I believe your son even came over per Sword Art's request. So
Yes, it was someone's request.
yeah. Well,
Yes,
because I
someone
believe
scouted him.
they're in the same region. They're from the same region. I believe that that was his request. So it was.
I I think Yurson played in the PCS last season. So
Yeah.
Sword Art would have been playing in China at the time, but I don't think Yurzon was and Sword Art were actually playing in the same league at the same time. But
Maybe
I
that's
wouldn't
right.
put it past him to still be scouting his old league.
Yeah. I mean, I just think. Yeah, I'd agree because they're obviously doing something weird with Sword. I
Hmm.
still don't know how I feel about that move, to be honest. I'm interested in the new jungler we have.
Yeah.
I think he could be somebody who's definitely worth giving a look to. Not again over Spica. I mean the sad thing is right now I think we're both in agreement that basically every position is blocked
Yes.
currently to any players in the organization and probably any academy players. That's for sure. I don't see there
Hmm.
being a major upgrade from anybody in any of the academy teams.
No.
But I agree. Obviously, like I think I will say I feel comfortable with them in third going into this split. It's really also why I want C9 to win
Hmm.
the MSI. And we
Yeah.
saw yesterday if they play their game, they absolutely
They
can
can really
win.
do something. They absolutely can. They absolutely can win if they really, really don't get in their head over it. They turn nameplates off. They don't think, okay, we're playing
Right.
against RNG. We're playing against Damwon. It shouldn't matter. They really need to just play. When they play their game, I have confidence that they can at least at least do well enough maybe to tie our best performance at MSI, hopefully.
That'd be awesome.
Would be to make finals, which is good. I wouldn't be a fourth spot at Worlds, but I would be happy with that.
Absolutely. And I think for me, I was saying this to somebody yesterday. This makes me feel better about the LCS as a whole, right?
Oh
Because
yeah.
like after the first 3 games for C9, I was like, oh my god, like what I was most worried about is are we overestimating how good the LCS is, right? Because everybody jokes about minor region, like clearly, and it comes into the conversation as well about you know the import rule, right? Like especially at MSI, like the North American players are playing very well right now, right? Blabber obviously was not great in the first couple games, came on in the last couple.
Hmm.
Vulcan has been an absolute stud, like the whole time. And Perks didn't really show up in the first 3 games either. So I was questioning Meleri whether or
Right.
not the import rule matters, like what this kind of comes into. And so when looking at, and I know this is a little bit of a different turn from what we had prepared, um, but we were going to talk about, and we still will talk about, like amateur scene in terms of players, because I know that Meleri has some data on a couple players that TSM have. But I want to ask you this before we kind of dive into that. Like, are you liking the way that the academy and the amateur scene is starting to get set up? Now, I want people to know this too. It's gonna take a while. It took EU Masters like 2 to 3 years to really start producing the kind of talent that we're used to the LEC doing. Um, and I know that they can draw off more players, but it definitely has encouraged and increased the amount of play within that region. Mallory, I want to ask you, do you foresee NA at least getting better? Doesn't mean they're going to be great, but getting better in terms of talent based off of this new system.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I have and I have examples.
Good, go. Let's hear it.
I'm just going to list off some names that off the top of my head, I believe they're residents. I may have to check. Someone may say, "Oh, well, actually, this person's an import," and I just didn't know. I'm going to list off some names that I think within the next few years you will see. If they were an amateur and moving up to academy, if they were an academy, they're going to get an LCS shot, or they're going to end up doing something. I'm just going to list off a few names that have not been in LCS yet. I could obviously say contracts. I could
Mm-hmm.
obviously say Hanser and Viper and obviously huge standouts for Proving Grounds.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just going to list off some names. Prismal,
Yep.
Isles, King, Jojo Pyun, Quacker, Kenvi, Meech, Daption, Tony Top, Panda, Harry, Tenacity, Rose Thorn, Triple, Tally, and Chime.
Yeah. So there are a couple. I mean, there are a couple Oceanic players in there, but like in general,
Sure. Yeah, but
yeah, they're
residents.
NA. They're not residents. Yeah.
I would put money on that group of players, the majority of them getting an LCS shot. And they are all, at least as far as I'm aware, residents. Some of them aren't even in academy teams, like Quacker, Panda, and Daption were on wildcard.
Mm-hmm. They were a solid team. I liked that team. I love Tony
Yeah,
Top personally. I think Tony Top is supremely underrated. I think
he's
Rose Thorn was a
great.
great jungler too. While I was watching
Hmm.
them at scouting grounds, there's I know probably about 75% to 80% of the names that you just mentioned, and I totally agree with you. I think that those players alone, and they're all young. Almost every
Yeah,
single one of those, except for like the first four that you mentioned, are all between the ages of like 17 and 20, which
yeah,
is what the LCS needs. Like, I talked about. Did you have a chance to listen to the last podcast?
I did.
Okay. I don't know if you agree with me on this or not, but I do think that for the region to get better, the age of these players matters. Like, I'm glad that Onda signed on to Immortals Academy. That's
Hmm.
great. But he's 25 years old now, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's not a player that you're going to look at and say, all right, like, he's going to be a staple, like, person who's going to bring the LCS into prominence. Like, no, what he's going to do is he's going to give a lower tier, him and Contracts, I think both of them. Although Contracts is still pretty young. I think Contracts is only 21, 22. But, like, Onda's going to come in and potentially, push for the Immortals starting spot, I think, and allow that team to at least be a respectable playoff team. Which right now, what we want in the LCS is for our top 3 teams, whoever's going to be representing at Worlds, because I think I think you'd agree. I think any LCS, team, and hopefully fans would agree too. Our goal is to just perform internationally right now. That
Yes.
and that is going to be overly important to have talent, even in the lower 4 teams to 5 teams, who can at least put up a challenge, right? Like Golden Guardians was not a challenge last year. You know, CLG will be now that they have their full team, but before then, not a challenge. Immortals, kind of a challenge. I think Insanity is still like severely underrated. Um, but there's a lot of young talent that I think is coming up through the LCS, and I think going back to my point at with Cloud9 at Worlds, right? Like, I think we're starting to already see the last year and a half or so of them focusing more on developing talent. Yes, they bought perks. I get that. But they're still developing a lot of talent in C9. Blabber, Vulcan, even Fudge. That is still a young team overall with 2 good veterans. And Perks is still only like 21. So it's like, I don't know, like that's really promising to me. And I feel like NA is on a much better track than it was before. And it sounds like your algorithms are starting to feel similarly.
Yep, I would say so. And my big call for the age argument is that I don't think that age is like the hard stop for any player. I don't think you should retire when you hit 25 or anything.
Mm-hmm.
But what I do think that age provides in a psychology way is that if you get a young player, if you get a new player, they are much less likely to revert back into something that didn't work, and they're much more likely to change the game or do something unique
Mm-hmm.
just because they don't have that experience and they still have that drive and saying, I'm new here, I'm going to show up. And we've seen that before. And C9 coming from Challengers or the promotion tournament in 2013,
Yep.
they were all new and they said we're just going to do whatever we want to do. They didn't play in those tournaments in early season 1, season 2. They didn't play at they didn't they didn't play at DreamHack. They didn't do anything like that. But they still obliterated
Everybody.
everyone. And that's what we need. And that's why in sports like football, they still draft in college, they still get high school players and they start them. They still get college players drafted to NFL and they still start them
Yeah.
because these are the unknowns and they're not going to think, "Oh, well, I do this because I win when I do this." NA doesn't have that luxury. We don't have good experiences to fall back on.
Yeah. Well, and it's the young players, they're the ones who push things forward, like you said, right? I mean, because of their
Yep.
unknowns, right? They
Yes.
are the ones who can take things that maybe they just want to try and be the ones to push the envelope. And like you said, there's no hard cutoff day. Like, I don't want this to sound like I'm some like LCS ageist. Like, I'm supremely happy for people like Onda who are getting another chance. I always felt like Onda kind of got screwed. To be honest, I remember interviewing him a couple years ago. I thought he was really solid. Never truly understood what exactly happened to him. It just felt like he fell out of favor with everybody. So it's good to see a player like him, like Viper. Like Viper, yeah, he was a one trick, but guess what? He's getting better on all these other picks. He just needs time. And I and I'm
Hmm.
and so like I do personally believe that we will start to see players who play into their 30s. There are CS:GO players who can aim with, frame per frame, precision, who are like 35 years old, guys. Like, if they train their bodies to focus on reactions, right, and to focus on eye movement and everything else, these players will be able to play into their 30s. There's no doubt in my mind. We're just not seeing it yet. And one of the things I hope is that the LCS will, be able to improve on patience for players, which is why this is, I don't know how you're going to feel about this. I actually kind of hope outside of Stixay and maybe Newbie that Golden Guardian stays the same. Because I want to see Can Niles and Iconic and God, it's not Palafox. Who was their mid laner dropping
Which team?
for Golden Guardians?
Golden Guardians had a Blaze Olive.
Thank you. I'll play solid. Like all three of those players, I think deserve another shot. Like I don't
Yeah,
want to see them go anywhere. And it's like with Excel, for those of you who may not follow the LEC, they're bringing in Nuke Duck, who we know a lot about, over Jekolad, which Jekolad is an extremely good young player. Like if an LCS team wants a specifically, one of the um, maybe lower tier teams, if they want like another player to push their mid laner to get better, like I go pick him up like right now. I'm not even kidding. I'd go buy him. Like he's a stud.
it's yeah,
So
it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy because not only did they have Checolad, they also had Hatrix,
yep.
who was in the finals of EU Masters,
Mm-hmm.
and it was crazy. Not they didn't win. Uh, Props to Karmine Core, but all 10 of those players in that final. I know we've seen Arome before, but
Rome's a stud.
all 10 of those players are going to be in LEC. They had Hatrix and Checolata, and they chose Nuke Duck instead. And that really, really, really goes to show that sometimes they really don't care about new players. They just want something that will keep them above 10th place.
Yeah, and for a team like Excel, they're trying to make the playoffs. They don't want the inexperience. They want to break that playoff thing and the drought. I think they move back to Jekolad, potentially even during the middle of the split. We'll see. But like this is all I hope a good conversation for all of you all to understand that like Meleri and I are kind of on the same page. Things are getting better for the LCS. And there are teams out there, like Excel, who make similarly bad decisions like some of the LCS teams do in terms of younger, older players and less experienced, more experienced, those kinds of things. So we're really starting to see the development of I think a true league. Not what it was before, which is why I personally like franchising. I know a lot of people don't. They prefer that there is the ability to, have promotion and relegation. But I actually personally think that that can be limiting at times as well. So it's very interesting to see these connections. And that is a long way to carry us into the next part of this conversation about the amateur team specifically. Now, TSM have had a junior team before. As far as I can remember, they've never had an amateur scene. And what I'm talking about is amateur scenes like, the I believe it's the Uprising League. There's, Paleo. There's I can't name them all. Honestly, I don't have them in front of me. But there's a lot of amateur scene teams and leagues, which used to be when Challenger was a thing, when you could raise yourself up to the LCS. It was like a premier scene. We were producing so many players. Anybody had a chance. And then when they did franchising, they didn't do a good job of allowing that scene to get better. It actually killed the amateur scene. There was maybe like 2 leagues when there used to be 5 to 10. And there was content creation around it. There was all this crazy great stuff. The reason I know is because we were in it in the last year and a half of it. Now we have major teams. I mean big teams. C9s, TSMs, evil geniuses. They are investing into the amateur scene, which kind of sets up. Now, Meleri, I don't know if you know baseball or not.
Eh,
Kind of okay. Yeah. So like, and for our listeners, I think I've talked about this before. There's the major leagues, then there's AAA, AA, Single A, and then there's a bunch of other smaller leagues under that. But they're all a part of the same teams. For me, you all know I'm from Cincinnati. The Cincinnati Reds have the Louisville Bats. They've got the Lookouts. They've got Dayton Dragons. They own all of these teams, and it's a way for them to build a farm system to build up these amateur players. We talked about it last week. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into it this week. TSM now have one of these teams. And they had some very interesting players. I know that you have some data on a couple of these players. What can you tell us about them?
yeah. So um, we know that Doxa played for Winthrop last
Mm-hmm.
split. He didn't get to Proving Grounds, unfortunately, but he played at Nerd Power Street, I believe. He looks okay. I think for an amateur, I think that's what you want to see. 61% kill participation is pretty good. His XBD10 and GD10 for a team that lost out in the tournament is pretty good to be positive at 140 and 72 and about a 7.8 CS per minute, which is about average. 604 DPM is good. However, his champion pool is ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
He played a lot of Orianna recently, which is fine in Zoe. That's meta. But he's played Victor, Syndra, LeBlanc, Akali, Yone, way down. You have to go to get to one Azir game that he's played,
Yeah, we talked about
and
that last week too. That was
and
funny.
two Yasuo. And that's good. I want to see that he has these picks, that he feels comfortable doing these things. So I feel good about Doxa, at least in an amateur standpoint, whether or not he will actually show up and maybe contest Sword and contest. I think he's going by Takeover, right?
Yep.
Is his in-game name. Whether or not he can contest either of them is yet to be seen. Um, Next one, the one I have actual hard stats for is Gorica, because Gorica played in Golden Guardians Academy and he most recently played for Barrage. Now, Barrage, I liked Barrage a lot when they were in the tournament.
Me
They
too.
were fun. They really impressed. They didn't end up that way towards the end, and I really feel like some of their players held them back. I think that Pyke, Lord, and Fnatic were not amazing.
Eh,
Uh,
it's
uh,
kind of their MO.
oh, wait. um, APA though, always playing ahead was great. I really liked him, and Gorica seemed to really just play with them. He had very good kill participation,
Mm-hmm.
eighth in the entire tournament. Good CS per minute, good CSD at 10. Terrible at warding, especially for an AD carry, but that's okay, and that can be taught. And it's certain things like that, the instincts that you really want to see. Really likes the Kai'Sa. Played 41 games. Has played 41 games with Kai'Sa, but Zyajin, he played a little bit of Jinx too. It's good to see things like that, things that they have the talent, they have these instincts. For the other for the other three players, it'll just be my thoughts because I don't have as much data on
Mm-hmm.
them. I would say for let's start with Eclipse. Eclipse played most recently for Redemption Arc and Sinus Please as their top laner. Uh, and he played for the Challengers Uprising playoffs. Um, he's not as good as the other two. He's had some good moments, but really good goal difference at 10 and very short bursts, even though they end up losing the game. And looks like he has good experience differential at 10. His warding's not great. His damage percentage is not great. His KDA is not great. His skill participation is great, but there's certain things I'm not as happy with Eclipse. I think he can still grow. I think it's fine to get an unproven player, especially in the top lane where it's not as impactful.
Absolutely.
But that's just me. Infectrix most recently played for Team Clarity as their jungler. Also not as good of a KDA. Kill participation's about average, and all his other stats are about average, except for his wards per minute, which is very low. 0.27 wards per minute is pretty bad, especially for a jungler. He likes to play a lot of Graves, Olaf, stuff like that. More aggressive. So certain things he doesn't think about can be taught these things. A few of these things saying you need to ward more. Will that sort of neuter him a little bit in his aggressive playstyle? Probably. But it doesn't seem like it was working out in the first place. So Infectrix overall, not as confident in. And lastly
Don
is
Bray. This is
Don,
my favorite part.
Don Bray. So Don Bray, I know absolutely nothing about, and I don't think anyone does.
No, I did my
He
research, and I think he could be a stud though.
he's 17 years old. He played for
just the
AoE
AoE
will
Will's
kittens
kittens. Yep.
with Darkwing. So I know Darkwings.
Yeah.
But hey, I think that in a team of maybe they're not as good, maybe they need to be taught, having that extra voice who doesn't really know anything, and like we talked about before, if he's going to be that next big thing and really change the game, he would be the one to do it in this team.
Hmm. Well, I mean, he's the one who literally is climbing to challenger for the first time ever. And I think those are the kind of
Yep.
players the team should want on these amateur teams, like the kids who are young, who are just breaking in to the league for the first time. I think that that is, in my opinion, I like when I look at an amateur team, that's what I want. I want to grab as
Mhm.
many first time challenger players who are as young as possible, especially on amateur. I don't mind older players on academy. I don't want anybody, and I do mean anybody, over the age of 22 on an amateur team because it just takes too
Right.
long to develop them. By the time that they're good, in terms of the way that League of Legends teams looks at it, again, this is not my personal opinion, but is in terms of the way that League of Legends team does it. If you are like Treats might be the only example I can think of a person who got their first real chance at the age of 24 or later, and that's very rare.
Mm.
I mean, that's extraordinarily rare in this game. So this is what I want. Like Don
Yeah.
Bray is somebody who I think everybody should be watching, like
Yeah,
for
I
a while.
just noticed. I just looked up. He has, as of about 2 weeks ago, he had three accounts in Challenger and one in Grandmaster.
Yeah,
That is crazy.
yeah,
For a 17-year-old, I'm sure he has a lot of time on his hands. At 17, I know I did. But yeah, I think he's a huge unknown for me, and that's great. As for me, for someone who really works in stats and works at and looks at numbers instead of looking at these players, having something that I don't know is really intriguing for me and something I really can't know anything about.
yeah, and you won't until he starts playing in
And I won't.
tournaments. Um,
Yeah, and I
it's gonna be interesting. Um, so yeah, so I mean, those were like the biggest things that I wanted to go over with you. I think we've gotten some good stuff. I think looking forward, I guess I want to talk about uh, to finish this up potential optimism for TSM going into the split. You can still be pessimistic if you want to, but I do think that we would both agree that there's a more optimistic take going into the split than compared to what we saw after the lock-in tournament. So
yeah.
talk to me real quickly about where you think this team will and can improve, and what you think, especially with the meta, which is something I want to talk about because it's been super interesting. I can't wait to specifically see Spica in this meta.
Hmm.
I feel like that could be super fun. But I want to get your thoughts
Yeah.
on that first. Talk to me a little bit about the meta and your potential optimism for what they can do better going into next split and why. I would love to hear your thoughts on why they will make worlds.
All right, let's start at the top. Rumble is pick ban right now.
Mm-hmm.
That is my first point.
Love it.
Even if that just frees up a ban slot for us. If the other team has to ban Rumble against us. I know Huni hasn't played Rumble a lot recently because he hasn't been meta. I'm sure
Mm-hmm.
he could do it again. He used to be the best Rumble in the world, maybe around
Easily.
2015. I believe it was while he was on Fnatic during Worlds, he turned around to tower dive and got a double kill in the group stage. I remember that clear as day watching that moment. That's a big thing. And how are we dealing with recent MSI spoilers right now?
I mean, we pretty much already said that Cloud9 made it to the next round, so I think we should be
Okay,
good.
cool. Cool. So Lisa and top, I'm not sure will still be meta by the time Summer Split starts. But I would really, really like to see Huni on Lee Sin because while it can, we saw Fudge destroy Khan on it, which is
Mm-hmm.
crazy. Just say that
That's a
out
weird
loud.
sentence.
It's a weird sentence to say, but Lee Sin is definitely more of a versatile. If you were losing lane as Lee Sin, you still have that backup as the initiator. As worst comes to worst, your ult can be a disengage. You have a long range engage and shield. That's still pretty good, and that's a good champion for Huni, I think, especially to go aggressive if he has the ability to, especially if he's feeling himself winning lane. I like Lee Sin a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think my big thing for Spica, and I've aired my grievances on the Talking TSM Discord about this. I think Spica lacks a certain amount of jungle pressure.
Mm-hmm.
Something that I see in LEC playoffs and EU Masters and Worlds that it's just something about if if you make a dive topside that doesn't go well and you're playing and say you're playing blue side, your your red buff's gone, your Krugs are gone, your Raptors are gone. Saying inspired against Elyoya, they were constantly at each other's throats for things like that, not just trying to make plays, but punishing the other jungler. And for any misstep, miscalculation in their play. And I don't really see Spica doing a lot of that, especially during the laning phase, which I think can be taught, especially if they get some good assistant coaches and analysts, good research. I think that can be done easily.
Absolutely.
For the rest of them, I think the AD carry meta is about the same. Trist, Kaisa. Jinx is pickable right now, not as good as it was, say, for LEC playoffs or EU Masters. I know Lost really likes Jinx. He plays really well on it. He did in the past. Support meta is about the same. So I think I'm very confident that TSM will make Worlds just because the improvements they have to make are just iterative improvements, and they can do that. The hard part's already over. They just need to they can keep their team play the same, but just improve their laning stats, and their win rate should go up. And they already have a very good record to start that off with. A 12-6 record, a 66% win record is absolutely nothing to scoff at.
Yeah.
That's a lot of leeway you have, especially when a lot of these other teams like EG are 2 wins behind you.
It's a nice little buffer, to say the least.
Yeah. 100 Thieves is only a win behind us, but especially with Abadage coming in right away, they're not going to kick off the ground running.
No.
It's it seems very unlikely, so I don't doubt that that gap will grow too. So as long as they keep up and they keep the same, I don't have any doubts about that. It would just be towards the end if we start falling off or if 100 Thieves really starts to pick up steam and we drop some games is when I would get worried. But playoffs still loop into Worlds regardless of regular season record.
Mm-hmm. And that's where I'm going to be interested to see. I feel like one of the things that this team has struggled with is adapting to metas quickly.
Mm.
And so, I mean, we saw it as playoffs went on. They got stronger. They sucked at the beginning. I don't know if maybe that's a Bjergsen thing, to be honest,
Maybe.
because it seems like every team that he's ever been a part of, they struggle at the beginning, then they come on, as the meta develops. I'd obviously rather that than, than them be
Right.
great at the beginning and then suck later. But it would
Yeah.
be nice for them to find maybe, a little bit more consistency at the beginning of metas. And I think
Mhm.
I don't remember which patch we'll be playing on when the split starts. I want to say so. We just did 11-10 today.
Probably 11
11 maybe.
third. I don't know if they do 11-11 because I feel like there'll be at least one more patch before then.
Well,
Because
the
11-11
season starts on the
just came
4th,
out on
so
the
that's
4th.
that's that's yeah. It'll have to be 11-11 or 11-12. It can't be
I
13
think it'll be
because it'll
11
come out
12. I
after.
think I think it'll be right at the beginning of 11 12. But well, they may actually, sometimes they have started a patch
That's
prior
true.
to live patch.
Yeah,
So it could be 11 11.
that would be
Yeah. And if
interesting.
that's the case, then I think the MSI meta would be mostly the same.
I would think so. I'd have to imagine so. I don't think that they made any changes in 11-10 that were like. Well, actually, no. They're all the jungle changes that are coming in.
Oh yeah.
I forgot
Oh,
about that. That could be
that's
interesting.
that could be interesting. I don't know. I'm not a jungler, so the impact of that is a little lost on
Oh,
me
it's
until I
pretty
actually start
substantial.
seeing it play.
It's gonna
It's
be
but
It's
There's
gonna
always
allow a
substantial
lot
jungle
of new
changes, though.
champions. A lot of new champions should be because the whole goal is to be able to open up the jungle pool.
Hmm.
So seeing things that you may not expect, um, I think could probably happen. I think they're
Well,
changing a lot of the jungle timers. They're changing a lot of the
yeah.
XP given, a lot of the health that some of the jungle camps have. So that I didn't even think about it, but that could actually be substantial because we're not going to see this obviously at MSI, um,
No.
but we will see it
Yeah,
at the
and
start of next split.
if there's anyone that I would trust to bring out something that's never been seen before, Speak has done it. He played
Mm,
River Shen in playoffs and
yeah, we
won
would
with
love to
it.
see that again.
And then it was copied by Yankos the next morning, which was crazy. And I thought I loved seeing that because I watched both of those games live from one night to the next morning.
Oh, it
And
was
the
awesome.
interview, the name drop was great. But I would, I think Spica can easily prepare for that. And the new picks will open up a lot for our team comps. He played a lot of Udyr in playoffs. He played a lot of Hecarim when it was open during the regular season.
Mm-hmm.
His jungle pool was not that great last season, but I think that was a meta slave issue, that there
Yeah.
weren't a lot of viable junglers
Well, it
in
didn't seem like
general.
he was super comfortable on it. A lot of his picks in the
Hmm.
past, like I was calling for the J4, as I'm sure you heard like a million
Oh
times.
yeah.
And I know it wasn't like super meta, but he's just so good on J4. I was like, please just pick it. It's at least
Yeah.
meta enough to be able to be picked. Um, so yeah, I mean, we'll see. It's gonna be interesting. I do think that they'll probably. I think the AD carry meta will probably change at least a little bit by then because I don't think that they want to do another year where it's like the same three AD carries.
Hmm.
Um, so we'll have to see what happens there. Oh, and there's the new marksman that'll be coming out very
Right.
soon too. So I
Whether
assume
or not they'll be enabled for LCS is a different question.
that'll be interesting. I still think
Oh, but Viego will be.
Viego will be, so that'll be an interesting pick. I could totally see Spica doing that. I do think, again, talking about like the potential meta, the optimism for TSM. Like I'll be honest with you guys, I think the way TSM were playing, I think TL just was a style difference for them. They clearly were not able to overcome that. I think that they went 2-6 against them during the playoffs. I think that they very easily could have won a couple of those games and been the
Hmm.
ones in finals. And it seemed like they had Cloud9's number at the end of the split. So, you know, obviously I'm an overly optimistic fan. That's just what I'm going to be. This is talking TSM after all. But like, I do think that we can go in and make you know surprise a lot of people. And I think if we come out the gate running, get a couple games ahead of some people, that then we can really start experimenting with the meta and kind of figure some stuff out before we head into playoffs. I mean, 27 games allows you to do that. That's what one of the beautiful things about playing 3 games a week. Like I know some of the players are complaining about it, but guys, like let's all think about this. The LPL has largely been the best region, right? They're playing. I just looked at this the other day, but they're playing. I think it's like almost 40 games per split before even the playoffs. And every team has stated in the past the best practice that they get is on the stage because the teams actually have to try and play through the games. It's not like scrims where teams will play random crap or they'll only play the first part of the game and then quit on teams. That happens still a lot. The more games they play on stage, the better the LCS is going to get. I think we already saw it this year. I think that's why C9 is playing a little bit better right now. I think we're going to see it during the summer too. So, yeah, any last thoughts here, Meleri, before we sign off?
Uh, no, just feel watch the LCS, watch Proving Grounds, watch Academy. It's the
Mm-hmm.
best way to really make sure that these changes happen and things start to change. But I feel pretty confident going forward.
Absolutely, absolutely. Can you tell everybody where to find you?
Yeah, I post about League sometimes on my Twitter, which is BCSGME. And uh, that's that's really it. I don't have any other professional platforms because I still just do this as a hobby.
Hey, it's a fun hobby, and I really appreciate you
Yeah.
coming on and going through the algorithm. I appreciate you always being willing to challenge me as well on certain things. I think it's made this show better. It's made me better. Made me think better. So, um, you know, Mellery's been an absolutely fantastic member of the Talking TSM family. So, absolutely appreciate you coming on. We'll probably do this again, hopefully during the middle of the split this time. That is a hint towards some changing things for next split for this show. But as always, if you like this show, take a second to like, subscribe, comment. If you're watching on our YouTube channel, hit that bell icon so you don't miss another episode. Let's keep making this the number one TSM podcast so we can keep having great guests on like Meleri. Please, leave a review if you're listening on Apple. Share it with your friends as well. You can find me on Twitter at TGH Robert Haynes or the Gamehouse at TGH Esports. Lastly, as always, go to thegamehouse.com. We got some great content coming out. I know I haven't been putting out as much TSM stuff. Don't worry. Baseball season's about to be over. As much as I love those boys and as great of a season as it's been in terms of growth, I'm ready for it to be over so I can get back to putting out some better and more analytical content. So go make sure you check that out. And as always, thanks for tuning in. This show comes out every Thursday during the break. It is exclusively for your TSM ear holes. It feels weird to say this on the Talking TSM broadcast, but go support C9. Please, let's get them into the knockout round, and then hopefully they can make a run towards winning MSI. Other than that, I'm Robert Haynes. This has been Talking TSM. See y'all next week.